The Olivet Discourse is a passage where Jesus prophesied about things to come. It can be found in Matthew 24:25, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Within the prophecies of Jesus, there are things described that can be consistent with the description of a first-century setting. Jesus said, "Let the ones in Judea be fleeing to the mountains." And Jesus added, "Be praying that your flight may not take place in winter nor on a Sabbath." Here, after mentioning to be fleeing to the mountains, Jesus added to be praying that their flight may not take place on a Sabbath specifically. In a first-century setting where Jesus was, Jewish people would have had restrictions for travels on a Sabbath. For example, they returned to Jerusalem from the mountain being called of Olives, which is near Jerusalem, having a Sabbath day journey. Even though this mountain was near Jerusalem, yet it had a Sabbath day journey, implying that a specific restriction for traveling may have applied on a Sabbath. Furthermore, Jewish leaders in the first century were strict in their application of restrictions on Sabbath. For example, Jesus healed a man, and the man became healthy and picked up his coat and was walking. Now it was a Sabbath on that day, so the Jews were saying to the one having been cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to pick up your coat." Here, all these restrictions applying on traveling on the Sabbath may explain why Jesus would have been saying to be praying that they may not have to be fleeing on a Sabbath. Jesus said, "Let the one upon the housetop not go down to take the things out of his house." In a first century setting where Jesus was, many roofs were flat and people could be on them. For example, when Jesus was in a house, some people came from the roof and they unroofed the roof where he was. And having dug out an opening, they lowered the coat on which the paralytic was lying down. So here people were upon the housetop on the roof as they dug out an opening from there. Another example, Peter went up upon the housetop around the 6th hour to pray. So here too, someone could be found upon the housetop doing something in a first century setting. Jesus said that there will be two women grinding at the mill. One is taken and one is left. In a first century setting where Jesus was, women could be found grinding at the mill. Before the first century, it was, for example, written about the woman handmaid who is by the mill, or even "my wife grind." And so coming into the first century, in Matthew 13, it is written about leaven which a woman took and hid into 3 measures of wheat flour. Here, a woman was described as having wheat flour. It could be the case that this woman could have been found in the first century grinding at the mill wheat grain in order to obtain this wheat flour, thus exemplifying that in a first century setting, women could be found grinding at the mill.